5:35. I appreciate y'all's patience as we get phone set up. Thank you, Sydney, for getting that in order. So I'll go ahead and call to order this meeting of the City of Apache Junction Public Arts Commission on February 12th, 2021 at 5:35 p.m. With that, we'll go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, and we'll go ahead and move on to the roll call.
Okay, Commissioner Klett. Gretchen, can you hear us?
Oh, yeah, I'm here, thank you.
All right. Commissioner Nicholas. Here. Chair Buys.
Here.
Commissioner Coe. Commissioner Danford.
Here.
Commissioner Ham.
Present.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to move the vice chair election item before the announcement of artwork item in the agenda. So I'd like to move item 21-176 to be held next. We'll skip ahead in the agenda to that item under new business, election of vice chair. So at this time, I would like to call for a motion for open nominations for a vice chairperson. Do we have a motion for open nominations?
I move that we open the nomination for the vice chairperson.
I second that motion.
I second. This is Gretchen Klett. I'll second that motion.
Now it's on again.
All right, thank you.
So I have to take a roll call there.
Roll call, yep.
Chair Buys.
Yes.
Commissioner Danford.
Yes.
Commissioner Ham.
Yes.
Commissioner Klett.
Yes.
Commissioner Nicholas.
Yes.
So that motion was approved, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to call for nominations for vice chairperson. I guess I'll start by nominating person to my right here, Ms. Liz Nicholas. Call for any additional nominations. Call for any additional nominations.
I'll nominate Jeff Danford.
All right. Call for additional nominations. I didn't know if I needed to start over if there's a new one. All right, so I'd like to ask for a motion then to close nominations.
I'd like to move that we close nominations.
Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
All right, and a roll call?
Okay, the motion is to close nominations. Commissioner Danford.
Yes.
Commissioner Ham.
Yes.
Commissioner Klett.
Yes.
Commissioner Nicholas.
Yes.
Chair Buys.
Yes.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
All right. At this point, I'd like to call for a motion to approve the first person nominated for vice chairperson, which in this case would be Liz Nicholas. Is there I guess, do we need a motion to bring that to roll call? Yes. Is there a motion?
I'll motion to approve the first person nominated for the vice chair.
Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
All right, so at this point, then we'll go to a roll call where it will be a yes would be for Liz as vice chair, a no would be to move on to the next nominee.
Correct. So the motion is to approve Liz Nicholas as the vice chair. Commissioner Ham.
Nay.
Commissioner Klett.
Yes.
Commissioner Nicholas,
Yes.
Chair Buys,
Yes.
Commissioner Danford.
Yes.
4 in favor, 1 against. Motion passes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. With that, I think we have a new vice chair in Liz Nicholas.
All right, our
Congratulations, Liz.
Thank you, Gretchen.
All right. Well, thank you very much for everyone's participation there. And thank you for your continued efforts on the commission, Liz. So with that, we'll get back to the agenda. We'll go ahead and move on to approval of the agenda. Is there a motion for consideration of approval of agenda?
I make a motion that we approve the agenda for the Public Arts Commission on Monday, April 12th, 2021.
I'll second that motion.
All right.
Okay, the motion is to approve the agenda. Commissioner Nicholas, or Vice Chair Nicholas.
Yes.
Chair Buys.
Yes.
Commissioner Danford.
Yes.
Commissioner Ham.
Yes.
Commissioner Klett.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. And is there a motion for consideration of approval of regular meeting minutes of March 8th, 2021? Call for a
Commissioner
motion.
Klett, I would like to make the motion to approve the next meeting for March 8th, 2021.
Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. And roll call?
Chair Buys.
Yes.
Commissioner Danford.
Yes.
Commissioner Ham.
Yes.
Vice Chair Klett. Nicholas, I mean.
Yes.
I wrote that on my notes here. Commissioner Klett is a yes. Vice Chair Nicholas.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right.
Right.
And now we'll move on to item 21-180 on the agenda, announcement of artwork. Announcement of artwork seen by commission members. I believe we have a quick presentation on the donkeys of, and sorry if I mispronounced this, Carrizozo.
That sounds good to me. One of the reasons I want to share that is because it's so close to what Ryan and a lot of us have seen in places where they paint something and put it out there. It looks like they were very successful with this project, and so there was a lot of information on there that I thought maybe we could pull from when we decide whatever we're going to paint or do if we ever get to that point. The other thing that I thought was fun about it was I had a friend who went there, and I didn't know about it, so I went and researched it, reposted pictures, and they went straight through the internet and came back around to someone reposted them to that woman and said, "Oh, look, you're going to love these donkeys." And she was the one who started it. And again, because donkeys are trending, they're fun, and they relate to our mining history. And I love them, so I'm biased. I will admit that. But that's another reason I really wanted to share these ones. They're funny. They're quirky with them up on the buildings and things like that. People come in, they try and find them all, and there's little gardens of them, and I think that that's what makes them memorable.
And Gretchen, in reading through your through this before the meeting, I noticed there was a big component of like civil engagement and local business engagement. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, that was another part of what I liked about it, rather than just having like the kids at the school or maybe just, the traditional groups that are painting them. They had artists doing it. They had different businesses that sponsored them. Like I said, they've been doing it not just the one time, but they grew gardens in their businesses. They reflect that, like there was the one that had the cowboy boots. There was one that had railroad ties on its neck. And so they all reflected like the history and that community. And I like that as better than just picking a thing because it's available or because it appeals to the public. I think it should reflect and engage the people in the community.
I agree. This is Ann Coe. I have just joined the group.
Welcome, Ann.
Thank you.
And didn't they purchase one, like different groups would purchase them themselves too? So I think that was where some of the funding came back in, it kind of rotated in the economic funding.
Great. And do you know do you know how the location of the donkeys were determined? Was it by the
I'm not
community
sure. I
members, or-
can do more research on that. I think there's more. I can find out more, and I can even reach out to them. So if you'd like, I'd be happy to find out more about how, like I said, some of them are up on buildings and in the weirdest places, which makes them kind of like that geocaching thing. Here, I just turned over to the page. We've sold more than, so they're selling them as well. A feeding frenzy followed. We've sold more than 400 of the painted burros. They're in more than 30 states. Nearly every Lincoln County artist has painted one, including some fourth graders who had a field day with Mondrian blocks and Pollock splatters. So they were also learning about traditional artists in that, activity, which is another part of that thing where you can double dip in community. Besides strengthening the region's artistic appeal, the burros selling for $500 to $1,300 a piece help animal rescue efforts and challenge Markerson to fit them into buyers' cars, especially like watching each one leave burro heads placidly peering out of the trunk. So they're using it as a way not only to draw the public and increase art awareness and having them being public art, but it looks like they're using the money from them to fund an effort that they care about. Now, whether we decided to put the money back into the kitty for more public art, or whether we decided to do Paws and Claws, or to use it to fund another art piece, that's what we get to decide.
I was involved. This is Ann Coe.
Go ahead, Ann.
I've been involved in a couple of these for artists. One was City of Scottsdale horses, and one was, I don't remember what city it was, but it was dogs. And of course, the city provided the animal, and then we did the painting on them, et cetera, et cetera. Is that, since I came in late, is that sort of what we're talking about here?
I think that's how it started. I think the city provided some, and then I think, from what I'm understanding, it took off, and they invested. It said, let me hear, I'm going to go back to the reference. It said, the little town east of Sirocco, in 2005, they invested in a herd of aluminum burros. They invited local artists to paint the piece, then set them outside businesses, along the roads, and atop a few buildings. Motorists noticed them and stopped into a couple Toulouse Basin Gallery of Photography, and in their Gallery 408, and then it just caught on, and they started selling more. So it says we sold more than 400 painted burros out of the gallery. So I guess that gives me the impression that it took off, but I would like to learn more about that.
Yeah, this was long enough ago that I don't remember too much, but maybe I can do some research on it. I think it's a great idea, particularly to involve, somehow get the animal, whichever one we choose, and involve artists from these I was involved in were artists all over the state, and I think some of them were out of state too. It was a lot of fun.
It would be. Another reason is donkeys are definitely trending right now, and part of the reason for that is there's a lot of older people in the baby boomer set that are keeping them as pets. They're therapeutic. I'm noticing, I called a tax guy, a burro pack guy, and because I do wood burning on the packs, and he confirmed that his sales have gone up. I belong to a few groups on the internet for the donkeys. Of course, I caught on to the trend a couple of years ago, but I'm noticing that more pack burro races are being organized around California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Colorado. And all ages of people are doing these activities, and they're renting them. So I think we should get on board with that trend. Superior, I think, is having their burro race again this September, and we've got such great trails for that and resources to bring people, if they're interested in that, let's give them a place to be interested in that. So by bringing the art of them, and they're funny, they make you laugh. You've got the open burros. People are following them. They survive on tourism. So that's, again, one of the reasons, because it's historical to our area and the ghost mine and all those things. Otherwise, I don't know that I would push it as much, but that's just something that I see trending right now.
Yeah, well, Superior does not have the statue burros painted, do they?
No, but I went a couple weeks ago. I went to their art walk, and we were out there with our burros because we were promoting not only the art, but to let people know that the burro race is coming up. And a lot of people came together and walked the burros up and down the street, and they had a really nice mural walk there a couple weeks ago, and they had a nice little turnout. And they had live murals, too, which was another really cool thing. They had people painting the murals right there while you walked up and down the streets and partook in the new businesses that are opening. And
Gretchen, just to try to stick to the agenda here, there is an agenda item called Information and Reports, item number 10 on the agenda, which that art walk may fit nicely into. If you wanted to give make an agenda item to talk to in more detail about that art walk, it does sound pretty engaging. So thank you very much for that, Gretchen. They are cute donkeys, to say the least. And I'll say one of the fun facts I learned about Arizona, not being originally from here, is that there are local or like regional donkey herds. I'd never heard of wild donkeys before. I didn't know there were such a thing until I moved to Arizona. So pretty amazing. Excellent. Well, I absolutely appreciate your time and effort and investigation there, Gretchen. And additional information as you get it is always appreciated.
Let's find out what we can do that is more, related to the PAC goals. It's easy to get sidetracked. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that they're a great example of kind of hitting the core tenets of public art. Obviously the artistic value, cultural value, regional significance specifically to our town, and public engagement.
And also you're trying to invite people that you don't want to intimidate people either. So when you're using things like that, the guitar, the painted dogs, those kinds of things, they work, I think, because they relate. A lot of people can relate to them.
Yeah. I totally agree. I think it's a great idea.
All right. Any final comments? All right. Thank you very much. All right. Well, with that, Gretchen, we'll go ahead and move on to public hearings portion of the agenda, which I don't think we have anything for today. So we'll skip to old business. Item 21-181, presentation, discussion, and update by Mrs. Langenbach, Parks and Rec, proposed off-leash dog park and considerations for public art.
Good evening, Chair Buys, members of the Commission. Thanks for having me back today. Just wanted to kind of report on where we're at with the dog park coming along, and is more importantly the art portion of that we will be asking for your guys' assistance on. So really quickly, just wanted to share with you again kind of what the concept is. We're here on so across the street, Superstition in Idaho. On that corner, that basin is going to be converted into a dog park, 3 different sections here. And the main kind of thing right here that I wanted to share with you. So they did identify a few, I didn't include it in this one, but the last one we shared, the last time I was here, we had shared a few locations where art pedestals could be located that the architectural team had identified. But we talked about a bunch of different things that we were interested in at that time. And I kind of took your guys' input from the last meeting, talked again with our commission, and brought back just a couple of trying to narrow down what we want to see happen at the dog park. So just as a reminder, the city, in addition to other entities, when we build that certain portion of our funds that are going to be towards the construction of our park, will need to go to art. So we kind of had a couple of different, I think we kind of narrowed it down to a couple of different main concepts. The first one was that we would be looking at some type of dog tag memorial. One of the concepts was to do some type of a wind chime. And so a lot of folks asked, is there going to be a way for people to, sponsor a brick or sponsor a something in the park so that individuals can help purchase some things and potentially raise funds for future operations or amenities. And one of the things that we had shared in the previous meeting was this concept of creating a structure that is artistic, that we could either hang actual dog tags on or create larger ones that mimicked a dog tag that could be sold, engraved with the person's name, and that could be part of the art feature as well as a kind of our own brick memorial thing. We don't want to do what everybody else has done, what we're doing down at Focal Point. This would be another unique way of doing that. And so it could also be considered the type of art. The other part that we had shared with you, we really liked the whole love locks that are on the bridge in Paris. So talking about people's real dog tags and that they could either, get a second one for their dog, or if their dog passed away, they could put it on the fence. And so we'd have a designated area for that. You could do both of those things, and I don't think that they would take away. The second one isn't really an art work other than a, art in progress by the community. I kind of put these a little bit out of order as just some examples of it being seen. Oh, maybe I didn't. Thought we'd added the love locks on here, but I didn't. So this was kind of the idea of what the art could look like. We can certainly, figure out what we really want that to look like, but this is one option. The second option was to have something, might be a moot point. I don't know if this is I know you guys are looking at this as in the previous item just now about painting a series of something. And so I'd shared that the last time I was here. Kind of some of the examples of some of the different options, similar to what you guys just got done discussing. The Mustangs are done or the wild horses in Maricopa. They just released theirs last year, and they just put on display all of their different horses, and I'll just kind of take you to that location. So they had a wild horse public art project, and these are just some of the various ones that got released. I think it was in February or March of this year. And so they have a whole section in their public art commission of how they sought those, how they found the artists for what was the application process, and then how it got released. And so whenever I'd shared this prior, we were kind of talking about that same concept for ourselves, that maybe it was a dog or a fire hydrant, something that was fun to be able to do various art forms. This is not a very good depiction of it. It was just one of a dog with a little bit of color and something different on it. So kind of that same concept. The other choice, if we wanted to do something, various figures, maybe it's just canine iron art. So we don't do that concept, especially if you guys choose to go with, more of the borough theme throughout the community, then we probably don't really want to do the same thing for dogs. So, as you guys kind of figure that out, we're very open to any of the concepts that we're sharing today are all things that we would be interested in doing. So we want it to fit in with what you guys are already planning for the community. The other example was the cows in Wisconsin. I think that's the one that I shared with you the last time I was here. We didn't really have a great picture of it, but there's some really creative ways that artists can incorporate. Obviously, the bigger the sculpture is, the more of a canvas that they have on it. And so I think that's something, important to consider. And let's see, I think that's all that I have on the art options. I think would love to get your feedback if there's one in particular. And then also just kind of maybe discussing what our next steps are, what would be our process. And I think that that's an appropriate item. I think it's covered in the agenda to be able to talk about that.
I love the idea of the dog tags. I like both of the concepts, and I don't see why you couldn't use both of them. You do one as a fundraising option, as you mentioned, where people could put either their names or a pet's name or whatever on it. But the actual dog tags or cat tags or whatever from a deceased animal. I mean, I know I have a ton of them at my house because I keep all their collars with their tags on them. I mean, I think people from the community would really buy into that big time. And I can just see people showing up and just being happy that their dog's tag is on there. I love that concept. I think it's wonderful.
I agree. This is Ann. I have lots of dog tags, and I think it would be great. And it could become, like you said, a community art project with people bringing them in. And it could be more ceremonial and things like that. Pictures of the dogs. I don't know right now all the different things that we could incorporate.
Yeah, great idea on that. I like that.
This is Commissioner Klett. I agree. I picture like a big Calder sculpture with these dog tags blowing in the wind and picking up light and reflecting the changes of, when we get our crazy sunsets and stuff. I think that would be very special. And the sound, too, because it would have sound, it would have light, it would have meaning to the community. There's a lot of levels. And you could learn more about those kind of sculptures that move and that are interactive. People like Calder that do those kind of sculptures are neat.
Commissioner Klett, exactly, and thanks for making this a little bit bigger on the screen. So this was actually a military memorial that each one of those little items are kind of like a little disc that's on there. We just put it here as sort of a general concept that those could be made out of brass or something, like you said, that really kind of takes the sunlight or that really can make noise, as well as be something that visibly, is shiny and makes a lot of other shadows and different things like that. So this is just kind of like a little concept of it, but it kind of gives the idea of what that actual artwork portion with the tags could look like.
It also sounds like, one of the other considerations that we take in is how it can live out in the desert. And, a piece of metal that's stamped rather something that's painted that can fade. We want to think about those kinds of things. I know the locks of love. I heard about one of the bridges that they put all the locks on. It got so heavy from the locks that they had to come cut them off. And I guess that they restarted again. But it did impact the structure. So, again, we want to remember that we live in the desert and it's harsh on our artwork.
Absolutely.
Well, that's why I think it would work.
And remind me. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ann.
Well, one of the things you have to look at is what direction things are facing. North direction murals are not going to get a lot of sunshine. And south facing normally gets the winter sun. I'm very conscious of that in my house where I paint, where I put the artwork. So the sun and all of that fading can be dealt with if we have a choice on directions and things like that.
Definitely, and I think there's plenty of time to consider that.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I had one question. So I know that we had gone over the plan previously, and I'm just looking that there's a proposed 5-foot fence. That's chain link?
It is actually not chain linked. We would probably have to put something that was artistic on it that the dog tags would be adhered to. It is I don't know how to explain it any better. It's more like rails that come up and down so
Like
that
a
way dogs
security
can't.
fence with
Yeah. Yes,
vertical posts.
thank you. And so it does, but it has lots of areas where we can connect something to it. So I think we would be connecting some type of durable fabric, fencing or aluminum fabric that would be part of, we'd make sure that it looked nice and that it was, a part of the structure.
And that fence continues to separate areas 1 and 2, right?
Yes.
So there's engagement to that fence on the interior, the perimeter, between the areas, and to the exterior, right?
Yes.
So lots of opportunities on where
Absolutely.
it could go. Yeah, one of the thoughts I have with the second item of, having kind of a memorial, it sounds like almost like a memorial wall, would just be, how, with community engagement, how we would kind of determine how to keep that contained, right? So that would need to be a consideration as well, so we're not ending up with, collars and dog tags where they may not tie together into a sensible piece of art. But then potentially maybe there's something that we can do to expand on it to make it a little more design intentional. But yeah, I tend to agree that both ideas seem extremely strong. The statues do trend towards what we were discussing, and I think in one of the later agenda items I talk about potential locations for public art, and I kind of copped out and used this as one of them as well to save myself a slide. But the proximity of the proposed dog park to other locations in that portion of the agenda, I think would be something to consider as well. So, to that end, I'd also just note that, what's determined during this round of coordination or proposal isn't necessarily at the end of the road, right? So, there's probably potential opportunities in the future as well, if that's something we wanted to look at further. Can you recap for us, and we can maybe talk about it in more detail, but several of the locations that you viewed as potential? I know we talked about the fence line, the entry node. Were there other locations that?
Yes, thank you, Chair Bice. All of these areas that are in the shaded area, some of these are, exposed to sun. A lot of this whole section here is the entry for the whole dog park. Now, some people might end up entering over here, but this is kind of the front of the dog park. So we would find a location in here. So again, thinking about it in two ways. The first is that if it was an intentional piece of art, then it would be more like the picture that is shown on that exhibit here that we just talked about. Something that was made specifically with dog names on it, things like that. So not the one that people would just add. Right. To me, while it certainly is a neat feature, I don't know that that's really the art that we would be investing in to have at the park. I think more the wind chime one is probably the art. We just want you to weigh in a little bit on this other concept of people just attaching their own dog tag. So this whole location had various little places where we could have a pedestal or an art installation of some kind. There's lots of room in all of this that is very front facing. We do have a small little subcommittee that's talking to us about amenities, other portable amenities, as well as our rules and things like that they could certainly weigh in what is safe for dogs. We don't have a bunch of dog tags and it's something that's not safe for the dogs that are there. Should it be on the outside of the fence? Should it be on the inside of the fence so that people don't vandalize it? So the one that is more for people just to attach to, it's kind of at their own risk. So just like the love locks in Paris, at some point, if it's too big or it's going to becomes a problem, they could be taken down. And so those would be things that we'd have to work through on signage and things that we do for the community. Sorry, did that answer your question
I think
in general?
So. And I do agree that really the example of the memorial dog tag wind chimes is probably where our focus will end up being, because it's a little more intentional, and a little more contained in probably the scope of our committee. I did have a question though too about, and you kind of spoke to it when you were noting, or readdressing the locations kind of along the frontage of the park, which is, again, kind of where your cursor is now. And my question is in terms of scale, which is, if it's going to be in the entry nodes, it seems you'd want a more human scale rather than vehicular scale, right? So you're really talking about something that you can engage with as a pedestrian, rather than something to scale that you would see from the street, or be a monumental feature in the literal terms.
Correct. Yes.
One thing that I think is something we might consider, you mentioned that a lot of the art would be contained within the fenced area because of concerns about vandalism and whatever. What I think would be nice, since we've got this fence that's going around the property, and part of it does look like it faces out to Idaho and Superstition, what if we had some kind of metal, two-dimensional, like dog silhouettes placed strategically? Now, they'd be facing out, and it would kind of advertise to people driving by that that's what this is. This is a dog park. And again, it's low maintenance, like the ones that you see in fields where you have the dogs to keep the geese off and whatever, something like that, but obviously a little more artistic than that. But I think that would be a low maintenance thing. Again, a nice way to advertise it from the public's view when they're driving by.
Yeah, I think that was on the list of the items I shared with you all last time. It just didn't get a lot of traction from I didn't hear a lot of feedback from that, other than that those were good ideas. We didn't hear a lot from any of the other citizens or our Parks and Rec Commission that was so we do need to kind of pick one or the other. We don't have, unlimited resources. So definitely, if that's something that you guys think would be better to do, we can certainly look at that option. Or they could be added as a phase later on down the road if there's something that we wanted to pick one thing to do and it didn't, it is a small park, so kind of being intentional on, the types of things that we have there so it's not so busy. But yeah, absolutely, those are some other great concepts.
And so I guess the first step would be zeroing in on kind of the location, because I feel like that would inform a decision about kind of scale and intent on who is engaging, right? And to me, I think there's a lot of press regarding the opening of the dog park. I think it's going to be pretty well known and a pretty popular amenity when it's here. So, balancing out the need for visibility from, for using art as community engagement for like marketing almost, and letting people know it's there. If we're already getting that in other means, is that the best use of the limited budget that we may have? Is something to consider. And then, if it's something closer to the entry nodes, which sounds like is probably what's intended by, just from looking at the great landscape design I'm seeing, it seems like there's really an intention to try to bring people through this entry sequence into the park. And if we're utilizing that on a more human scale, then again, that will kind of drive us in a different direction. And I think your example of the kind of the wind chime example kind of fits that modus operandi a little better. And then, Liz, to your point about engaging on the road, I think we can look at that when we see some of the other locations that are proposed, because you're right. Idaho Road is a major thoroughfare. So many people go through there. So I think what's one piece of information that would maybe help us zero in, and this is probably farther down the line, but just what is the scale that we can work within, that is kind of within y'all's intention and budget for the park. And something like the wind chime, where you can get community engagement for funding, may help us do a little bit more, right? So I guess at this point, if there's no more comments, I don't know if we need to have a quorum on kind of a direction to advise, or if you have direction enough. I know it's been pretty unspecific.
Well, I think the first thing would be, because if you go to the other slide, Liz, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like down below, having some dog-related sculpture. What is the public art project? Because our budget is limited.
Right.
So is the public art project some permanent art installation that's FIDO-related? The wind chime it may be artistic, it may be, but is that the public art project? Because our budget is going to be pretty small. It's supposed to be 1% of the overall budget. The budget may be a little bit bigger now if we have more development fees. So initially it was $700,000 total project, so that's $7,000. If it's now $1 million, that's $10,000.
Right.
So $10,000 isn't going to get us a lot. And one possibility, I didn't know if the landscape architects would design the wind chime area, then that in itself just maybe comes back here and says, yep, we like what they did. It goes to the council and the park board and say, yep, we like the wind chime concept, and that is a feature in the park. And then fundraising can be made for the other the real larger public art project. So to me, that's one concept, is that the designers, the park designers, landscape architects, whatever they have, come in and say, hey, here's this idea. We're going to take off this idea. Now we're going to really figure out a way to do fundraising, to add future projects in the future, to do the wind chime project is just a feature in the park, as to where the public art is really the permanent installation of some dog related. I don't know if Liz, if that's what you were thinking, but then you were also asking, what is the process, which we're going to get to
Later.
Later. Well, when we talk about Diane's possible scope of services, it lays out what the process is to go and do a public art installation, in terms of finding the artist, in terms of who gets to decide, what the art is it appropriate, and that whole process. And again, I'm kind of getting ahead of ourselves, but for example, depending on the work plan and the 10 sites and all that, and what our number one site is, we have $100,000 to bring a $100,000 piece of art to the city for a public installation. With Diane's help, she's saying that's about $3,800. So now we do that for the dog, and that's $3,800 for a $10,000 dog. So I'm trying to figure out a scale, because what she's proposing is soup to nuts. How do you go from somebody depositing a $100,000 check to going out and getting the art installed? So I think, I don't have all the answers, Liz. I'm just saying that.
And if I could maybe backtrack. So I will just say, I think that's the hardest part for you guys, is determining what is art is different to everybody. So to me, the wind chime thing that they display there, that is art to me. I think that's public art. Even though it has components of individuals to be able to be added to it, that would be a big public art installation. But I think the commission's role is to decide what is the public art that is going to be there. And we're fine with whatever it is that you guys choose, or whatever direction that we get. We don't have, so we've also already told our team the art is not going to happen. It's not part of our construction bid that's going out right now. So we will hopefully be going out for bid this month. The art is going to be installed after the fact at some point in time. So we have time to kind of decide what that's going to look like. And we just wanted to come back again and get it kind of you guys thinking about it. We gave a whole lot of ideas last time, and we thought it would be a good idea just to narrow it down a little bit. And then we can kind of hear as you work through what the process is. We can be part of that. And this would be a great one to be, one of those first few projects that we know we need to do, and could kind of be the guinea pig for the process. Mm-hmm. So it might not be perfect, and it might not be exactly, the easiest thing, but we have some time. So I think that's we're just here to kind of get it back on your guys' mind and.
Well, my suggestion, and this is just the way I feel about it, again, we're going back to the public engagement of the whole project. I think that we would be better off, this is just my opinion, and the way I've seen it work in the past, is to start with, say, just use an example, the dog sculptures, something like that that's placed in the park. Now, once people are engaged, they're using the park, they see the nice little sculptures, then you can say, hey, this is what we want to do. We're raising funds. You can have your dog's name up here, and then move on to the wind chime project. I think the dog sculptures are more important than the wind chime project. That's the way I'm thinking of it. And again, once you've got them engaged, you could start fundraising for the wind chimes. That's just the way I would see it done. At the museum, at the Superstition Mountain Museum, I mean, they have several things there that raise money that people donate to on a regular basis. For instance, I'm just using the railroad and the stamp mill as two examples. The railroad and the stamp mill were there first, and then people started donating to them after they were there. They didn't do it the other way around. That's what I'm thinking. Once they're engaged, you could do that.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Gave a lot of great ideas. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'll leave that up. You got it.
All right. Okay, so the next item here, moving on with old business 21-184, presentation and discussion on the work plan. So what I wanted to run through real quick, and I apologize for not having this last meeting, being out ill, but wanted to revisit it. So if you recall, in February's meeting, I spoke about kind of 5 potential locations, and wanted to present kind of 5 more just to round out kind of a top 10 list. So this slide here just kind of gives the locations of the 10 kind of potential areas that I had identified just from my little bit of research and in my opinion on what may be potential areas for public art investment going forward. And my hope here is that we can maybe identify some of these. Obviously, the dog park we just spoke in length about as one of the primary potential items. One good thing about that Liz mentioned is that it has a 1% funding already as part of its construction. So the other 9 locations, might be an investment that we receive from other fees. So we'll go forward and maybe flip back to this one at the very end. I don't know. I can't advance the slides, right? Thank you, Sydney. So this first one that I was showing is 4th and Goldfield. Again, I mean, I think if you drove along Goldfield at the end of March, you saw the amount of kind of traffic that was going through there. We've talked about this site a little bit in the past. Some of the benefits, it's along a marathon route, which is a kind of significant cultural event in our city. It's a local point of interest. You get a lot of people coming to take photographs during the fall and spring equinox. Scenic route, you see a lot of people just going on nice drives, walks, bicycle rides along that area. And it's also adjacent to the BLM land, which in the master plan has designs for further development, but already is activated as kind of a great open area park for residents who can get out there. In addition, I'll note there's kind of a pull-off area along at this intersection that people use for viewing the cougar in the mountain during the equinox. So there's already some bit of kind of placemaking that has just kind of spontaneously, I assume started. So that's kind of one location that I was proposing here, and then we can go to the next one. Silly Mountain Park and Garden. Obviously, they have the great kind of entry gateway into the botanical paved pathway. Really popular park, as you saw over the past year. It got lots of use, and it's you get great views, and it's a point of interest with some development already invested. The next one here would be Goldfield and East Lost Dutchman. Again, fantastic views of the Superstitions, iconic views. It's also along the marathon route, also a place where people kind of congregate certain times of the year or when events are happening. I recall the wildfires last spring, and people kind of going to get a view of the mountain. So there's kind of an impromptu meeting point for the city already. This next location kind of takes a different direction, Apache Trail and Delaware. Obviously, we have some investment in media and artwork already, so it would be kind of a continuation of that theme. There's major shopping areas on either side, so lots of commercial traffic and high visibility for people who are coming into our town. It's not far from our from Meridian, which is kind of the city limit. So we're starting to or continuing to develop Apache Trail as that kind of gateway into Apache Junction. And then the next slide is Prospector Park, obviously a great sporting complex, already a significant point of interest, great access to trails and scenic views, and also a major point along the marathon route. And then, of course, we have right next to us here the Multi-Gen and AJ Library, which one of the most popular amenities. We already have an adjacent park, which is, has good visibility from the street. It's already owned and maintained by the city, is my understanding. So, less coordination, I guess, with other jurisdictions relative to some of the other sites listed. Along major thoroughfare, so high visibility, and adjacency to other potential sites for art, such as the roundabout and also down Idaho as well. So, and then the last one I think is Superstition Shadows and AJ Park, an area I haven't explored too much personally, but looks to be a fantastic amenity. Again, access to lots of activities, and I think there's a high public engagement there for the potential for interactive art. And then, sorry, one more. Flatiron Park, which I think we're all familiar with. Again, significant vehicular traffic, great community amenity, adjacency to other art along a major thoroughfare, such as the dog park and the mosaic you can see here in the bottom left corner for the Apache Junction signs. And then, of course, we have the prospective dog park as a location, which we discussed in detail. Actually, are we going through some of these I may have touched on previously. And then Idaho 60, I think these are from February, so we'll go through these real fast. Idaho 60, major thoroughfare, high visibility from the freeway and coming into town. And potential art, if you look at the Google Street Maps, you can see the highway art, which I know Ann has spoken to on several occasions. And is that the last one, Sydney? All right. If we can flip back to that first slide, which is, or sorry, do you have the overall site plan? Here we go. Yeah, so these are those 10 areas located on a map. And one thing I want to call attention to is, hitting on a couple of those key points that were listed in the slides, adjacency to potential other art. So you can start to notice patterns, obviously kind of along Apache Trail, going east-west, vertically along Idaho, kind of a high concentration towards downtown of sites. And so, as we're starting to zero in on potential locations, I think considering adjacency to other potential locations, especially for something that, similar to what Gretchen was describing earlier, has potential to create then kind of a network of art that you can then incorporate into art walks and other community events like that, which, has a value in itself. So with that, what I'd like to do, if we can, is hear from the commission selection of maybe your favorite or one or two, so we can start to narrow in on this list, zero in, whether that be the dog park or other. and that will help, hopefully help us drive a decision that we can then use to integrate into the work plan and move on to some of these next steps, such as RFQ and strategic planning. So I'll open it up to the commission at this point for comment.
I'll go ahead and start. Personally, the two locations I think are probably some of the best would be the Multi-Gen Center and the dog park, just because, we're already talking about the dog park. The Multi-Gen Center is right there. It's a very popular area. I mean, I take my niece to the library on occasion. She loves to play at that little park, having some art in there for people to look at when they're walking around with their kids, their nieces, nephews, whatever, their dogs, riding horses around. It would just be it's just a great area, I think, for high traffic, high visibility. And since it's also close here to the council chambers, it's kind of the heart of the city, really.
All right, thanks, Jared. Any,
I like the dog park, but I also like the idea of Highway 60 in Idaho. A lot of traffic coming in and out of the city at that point. And I think that's a good point to start introducing public art to visitors. Because we're coming up with a lot of things that are attracting visitors. And if that's kind of the first thing they see when they turn off of 60 into Idaho, that kind of starts setting the tone for the whole city.
absolutely. Yeah, that was one of the advantages to that side I perceived as well.
And Commissioner Danford and Commission, I also want to remind, talking about traffic, we also have the roundabout location as well as a potential site. So,
absolutely. And one of I mean, obviously it's kind of an intentional omission, just for the fact that is such a high profile location. One of my intents was, see what we can, and we talked about the dog park too, really get a process in place, because I know that is going to be something that we're going to want to make a significant investment in when the time comes. But absolutely, it's definitely, one of the more high profile locations for art.
I did want to add, I think that's from the city staff perspective. I've been going to meetings for 5 years now, and that's like the number one choice from, I don't know about the council yet, but I think we've talked about it a long time with our downtown technical advisory committee meeting, et cetera. So I think I like the idea of this being the focal point of a lot of art. Obviously, if you're trying to create a downtown, but Highway 60 in Idaho sets the tone as people are coming in as well. But I just reiterate what Sydney's saying is that location has been talked about for a long time. Can you repeat
that location, 60 in Idaho, was where people are? Say that again real quick.
What I was saying is it's the new roundabout. Ever since that project was kind of in the works over the last 5 or 6 years, and seeing what other cities have done in Prescott Valley, and I think now on the way up to Cottonwood, they're trying to put art in all those roundabouts. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have a question, Commissioner Klatt. So with the dog park, on one hand, that seems like, we're all working together, and it would be a great place for us to get our feet wet on an art project. But I don't know how far out that is. And like you said, the roundabout's just sitting there as empty as can be. So I'm thinking, and then there's also, I agree with that little place on East Dutchman and Goldfield, having a piece of artwork up there also would deter some of the squattery kind of people that may hang out there if it makes it more of a community, upkeep kind of place. So that would be nice. But how do we decide which place might be that's what we're deciding now, but which one's going to happen first? The dog park, is that so happening right now, or, because I've heard you say down the line, which one can we get to the quickest, I guess is my question.
So one of the things that we're going to talk about in part of the whole discussion here that overlaps is that we are pretty sure we're going to get a large significant check from a multifamily developer that
Right.
can kickstart a project. That can be one piece of art, that might be 2 or 3 pieces of art. I don't know how far $100,000 goes. And I don't think anybody in this room knows how far $100,000 goes, depending on how extravagant you want to get. But typically, I would think that $40,000, $50,000 might be a typical art installation. So again, we may decide we'll take some of the money and add it to the dog park and say, okay, we've got 10,000. We may fundraise around that. That might raise another 10, and then this commission would kick in 30. I'm just throwing numbers out. And then is that 70 enough, or 60, whatever, to get the whole thing going? Is that enough to do something significant I don't know until we had some better ideas, I guess. But, so I don't know which is going to come first, because I think we do have options. Once the money starts rolling in, and we have 5 or 6 other multifamily projects that are in the works right now that have various levels of approvals and submittals. So,
And so my recommendation, for what it's worth, and just my opinion, is and to your point, Gretchen, is if we can find a project that we can start to define a process for, then as the funds become available, we can invest them at a scale to which they might have more impact. But I think defining the process is going to be really important.
Yeah, it's like getting in and getting our feet wet. So I guess my question is then, we're saying, let's just pick one. And it doesn't have to be a big money one. Maybe we want to pick something small because we just want to get through the process. Am I correct in parroting that or paraphrasing that?
that's one approach. Gretchen, that is one approach to get.
Okay, so that could be an approach. Okay, we could just pick something
One approach
small.
would be to go big and do a bigger project right off the bat. Another one would be to break up the money, do a couple smaller projects, but yes, it might make sense for this commission
The whole hog.
to start
Okay.
with a smaller project.
I kind of like that idea of the smaller project. That gives us a chance to work the bugs out of the process. So as we get into bigger projects later, we've already dealt with the issues that were going to come up.
And I think when we're looking at location, and I mentioned, to my comments earlier, having an expectation for scale, right? So a small intervention at a popular place like the dog park or the multi-gen library, where it'll get lots of visibility, but it's already an entity unto itself. Then we can make a small intervention there to work the bugs out of the process. We don't have to spend all of the budget at once. Put aside what we need to then have a larger intervention down, potentially later this year into the next session. And so I think with this graphic here is if we can, with keeping in your mind what scale of intention you would like to see, that may help us drive a location for our first intervention.
So going on that concept, I think one of the parks or the multi-gen center would be the best option for a smaller, more personal, interactive entity than having a big vehicular one at one of the big entryways like Apache Trail, Highway 60, Silly Mountain, because you want something big that's going to catch people's eyes at those spots. Because you're coming off of highways, you're coming off of major streets, whereas one of the parks, you're going to want something more that you can interact with at the sidewalk level.
Something that we've seen in other cities, I know you have, Liz, and some of us have, like Chandler. You bring a big piece of art in, everybody all of a sudden comes out of the woodwork, gets all excited, what did you put that piece of junk up there for? Blah, 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 like the running water, the falling water one at Chandler. I remember when they put that one up.
Yeah.
They were hanging people in effigy on that one. I think the idea of doing something small like the dog park, maybe fire hydrants or dog scratchers, starts to gets the dialogue going. Now people will come out and say, okay, here's what they did here. We start judging the feedback of the people involved. I kind of like the idea of the dog park first as
I agree with
The
you.
project.
I think that's a good project, and it's one that the people in the city can get behind, and that's going to be very
Exactly.
important. The only thing I do disagree with is I think as a second project, I like, Jeff, your original idea of Highway 60 in Idaho, because let's face it, the Multi-Gen Center and Flatiron Park are already, they're manicured, they're landscaped, I mean, not that they couldn't use art, but they are beautiful the way they are.
Right.
They're gorgeous. I would prefer to see Highway 60 in Idaho have something there that'll catch people's eyes, so when they're coming into the city, they're prepared for what they're going to see there. If we have them just at the Multi-Gen and Flatiron Park, that's almost going to be like a little secret of Apache Junction. But this is something that will get people engaged, and they'll want to come in and see what else is in the
It
city.
sets the tone for what they're going to see.
I
in the rest
agree.
of the city.
So Dog Park
I
first
agree.
and Highway 60 second.
I go with that.
And Liz, sorry to put you on the spot here, but you mentioned going out to bid in the next month or so. Do you have a ballpark timeline for the dog park? Because if we're talking about scale and looking for a small intervention.
Yes, Chairman Bice, our hope is that we'll go out for bid this month, probably towards the end of the month, and that will take us a couple months to go through that, hopefully get great bidders. We anticipate starting construction or having a team on board by August, and then it's about a 6-month construction project, provided grass and all that stuff goes well in the spring. So it should be here by this time next year. We would hopefully be close to our opening of the dog park.
Okay, so about a year timeline. We would probably need to enter in that process. What is your opinion on when we would need to start? Well,
So,
not start, but
I
have the
believe
plan in place.
I believe we would add the art component because it's not part of construction. The construction kind of needs to complete and they turn over the property to the city. Because we are not rolling it into construction, they would need to be complete and then we would be coming in. Now, again, we would go with in mind where it's going to be and have those decisions made. But it might be simultaneously to construction happening on the dog park, we're finalizing the call to artists or whatever the next processes are. So that way, as soon as it is complete, we could be starting with the installation of art shortly after that and be gaining momentum with the community as they see it being built.
And that's good timing, because if we do it while the winter visitors are still here, it's a good time for fundraising.
Yeah.
And there
Thank
is something to be said about the concurrent aspect. If they're building the dog park and we already have artists working on those commissions, then about soon after the dog park is finished, we bring those sculptures in.
Mm-hmm.
So people because when you first open the dog park, people are going to come to it like crazy.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, even people who don't normally go to dog parks are going to bring their dogs just to see what it is. And if we have the art there when it first opens, that starts the whole ball rolling.
Yeah.
Right, so it sounds like installation timeline, we would be probably minimum a couple, however, depending on the size. The installation of the art would happen after the turnover to the city, which would be about a year's time from now. So I think the park would likely open prior to that installation, but if we were prepared and, ready,
Close.
we could probably have that shortly thereafter. So I guess the question is, in terms of the dog park, what is the timeline that we feel as a commission we need to have a plan, if we're working with that deadline, have a plan that's ready to install? It does give us...
Mr. Chair, if I could. Part of all this, I think, is what we're going to try to have a planning workshop with you. So rather than decide tonight if the art's coming in 9 months or 14 months, to me, the idea is if we engage with Diane here, that we then can have a better idea of how all that's going to flow.
Great.
Rather than try that. So I kind of wanted to, because I think that dialogue will help. I think the dog park's great for a first project, not going to disagree. What that second project is, who knows what it's going to be. Could be, I think this site, there's no public land here, so you got to have to go get an easement from someone to put it at Idaho in the 60. So again, when you get to, this would be a great site, I'm not saying it's not a great site, but when you get to, you better have a plan C so that if the state land department decides not to sell you some land or however much you need or an easement or something, then okay, now we need to go to this other site. But I think that can be part of a larger process rather than, I mean, to me, this is great work tonight to say, hey, this should be our first project, because then again, we can take the required city dollars, the 10,000, and maybe add another however much out of that first money and make that project bigger, better, et cetera. And then how long that's going to take and all
Yeah.
that.
No, I appreciate that, and I am looking forward to getting to that agenda item on the work group as well. So I guess as a closing thought, we have these locations. It sounds like we've zeroed in on a couple locations that might be good for a first intervention. What I'm hearing is we have an intention for a small scale project that we can try to have up and running at the dog park. We have a deadline kind of built in.
Yeah, I think what you want to do is have a plan to go to the council. Remember, this is a recommending body. So I think it's already a given that there's going to be art at the dog park because the council approved the art in public places policy. So I think go to the council and say, yep, that's our first project. We know it's going to happen. And then I think you give some recommendation to the council, ultimately and the pros and cons of each site. I'm hoping that you have 4 or 5 multifamily projects and you'll have, $400,000 or $500,000, and that'll be a great problem to have. So ultimately, though, I think, to me, the council it's a given, I think, that they'll approve the dog park. But the next site, I think they'll want to weigh in as much as you folks do and come up with a recommendation. So that's why I think getting a game plan, presenting it, we can get on the council, any agenda, and say, okay, here's our work plan, here's the sites that we are proposing and why, and then start working from there. Because you don't want to have to go back to them multiple times, and the council changes every 2 years. It'd be nice to get a council-approved, say these are the 5 sites we're going to work on next, and get that endorsed, and then they still have to approve each piece of art that's going to go into. So,
okay. And so just because we're kind of we're building this plan as we're flying it a little bit. In terms of those recommendations, and this is a later agenda item, I know, but would that be appropriate as an agenda item to make a recommendation of a subset of these that are selected for further consideration?
I'm not going where you're going with that. What do you mean?
So if we have, obviously we don't want to recommend 10 locations because
Correct.
that's a lot.
Yeah.
So if we're creating a subset of those as a recommendation to the council, would that be an agenda item for us, for the commission as a whole to
I think
kind of
to
place
me,
those?
my goal was to do all that on a Saturday morning for 3 hours or 4 hours or 8 hours, whatever it takes to get this commission functioning, operating, figuring out what are the top 5 sites. We're going to say to the council 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and see if they agree with you.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That sounds good. All right. Well, lively discussion. I appreciate it, everybody. If there's nothing else on specifically location, we'll go ahead and jump into I guess, Sydney, is there anything else on the work plan this month? Okay. So we'll go into new business. Item 21-176 was moved forward in the agenda, so we'll move to 21-175. Proposed scope of service with Art Space 6 to perform tasks associated with the commission's work plan.
So we have to apologize to Ann and Gretchen because they don't have this. I guess a lot of the items in here spill over. They're related to the work plan. So I'm going to have Diane kind of walk through it. I think it still needs some work because we got this on Thursday. I guess there's really 6 tasks here. Task 1 is for her to get familiar with us and our codes and our ordinances. So that really is plus meeting attendance. And so try to help get the agendas going. So basically that is the 3 ordinances we have, any ideas for how they work or any policies or a list of policies we might need to add to the work plan. So I don't know. I was just going to kind of go through these real quick, I guess, Diane, and then have
Do you want me to stand up here?
Yes,
This
yes,
way?
yes,
Okay.
That'd be great. So do you have anything else? Because I want to kind of give a broad overview first. So task 1 is really her getting up to speed with us. I'm trying to paraphrase because we've already been here an hour and 20 minutes. Part two is really the discussion we just had. How do you get from having someone drop off a check to having the art installed? What is a process to do? That's what 2 is. 3 is the setting up, let's see, oh, no, I'm sorry. 2 is the work session, and then assistance with the commission, if you will. The third step is really what we just talked about. How do we get a piece of art installed? That there is an administrative piece to that, and that's what Diana's proposing. And this, again, I don't intend to go through this line by line, but we can. Task 4 is we have, in our work plan, someone wants to donate us a piece of art. We have no idea what to do with it. So 5 is how do we maintain our own art, or someone donates a piece of art. That's kind of in the code. And then once we have a lot of art, we got to keep track of it. So that was my quick overview, and then we could delve into it. I think the main things, Diane, I think if we would stick to 2 and 3, though, for the commission, because 1, I think, again, is just her getting up to speed. What do you envision the workshop being, and a lot of it?
I was listening with great interest about your ideas in terms of where do you want art to be? How do you want to get started with a public art plan? How much money do you want to spend for each of those projects? And that's kind of the gist of what you all need to decide as a body and come to some consensus. And what was very clear this evening was everybody loves the idea of having art in a dog park. And I think that rang through loud and clear. And I think the next is where are other locations you'd like to have artwork? What has city staff or council expressed in terms of where they would like to see art? But in a workshop, I think we would start going back a little bit to like square one, and that is what is public art? What is the intent of public art in Apache Junction? And public art, like you were talking about the library, libraries are wonderful places to have public art. I've known a lot of public art projects that have actually been installed inside of a library versus outside. And in many ways, you kind of stretch your budget a little bit by doing it indoors because you don't have as many constraints with putting public art outdoors. You immediately got people there who are going to keep an eye on it. The materials, you don't have to worry about it degrading or vandalism, all that. So, so public art can be indoors, it can be outdoors. It could be tourism motivated. It can be, it's almost always placemaking motivated. So I think in a workshop, you're going to talk a little bit about all these locations that have been discussed tonight, and then start coming up with like your top 5. And then, we talked a little bit about roundabout, and at one point I talked with city staff about a roundabout project, because that was what was expressed to me as important to city leaders and so forth. And $100,000 is not such a high, outrageous number, because the roundabout is a huge space. You're going to want to offset that with something that's vertical. You're going to have materials that are going to be able to be easy to maintain. You're going to have regular maintenance, because if it's tall, you're going to have to get up there and make sure it's in good condition. You might think about what is lighting. If it's in a roundabout, you're going to want to have it lit. So that becomes part of this $100,000 or whatever. So it's a long process in deciding where you want to put the artwork. If you want to do the regular process that I outline in number 3, best practices number 2, it goes through kind of step by step of how you get the artwork. If you're working in a dog park and you only have $10,000, that's going to be very limiting. Because if you put out a call to artists and it's only $10,000, most artists are going to say, oh, I happen to have a dog sculpture, so I'm going to just, decide that's what we're going to do. But it may not take into consideration, the path of the dog park, the size. You want to really talk about scale. You want to talk about maybe some type of interaction with the public. I love the idea of the wind chimes with the dog tags, because that makes it very interactive. people have ownership. They're going to see their dog's dog tags on there. I love dogs. I just want to say that, my dog passed away a few years ago. I would want his dog tag up there. So that's, in a way, it's interactive. It's going to provide sound to the area. A lot of times people create artwork wanting to have their photo taken with the artwork. So it's, they're going to have their photo taken with their dog's tags. And I'm not sure how you go about the whole fundraising part of this, but I think that's something that, the people would really want to become. It's better than, selling bricks. You've all seen projects where people, they want to buy a brick and you put the names on the brick. This is much more personal than that. It's much more original than that. So to Larry's point, where do you go from here? I think a workshop is a great idea, and talk about what are some of the constraints for working in public art? What is it the artist has to be able to do to create artwork? Not everybody who's an artist is a public artist. And there are so many other costs involved with that. They have to have insurance. They have to have a way to transport the artwork. They have to have an installation plan. In some cases that involves hiring cranes. So there are all these other expenses that go into actually installing it. If you have a dog sculpture, how are you going to anchor that so no one's going to just pick it up and walk off with it? If it's bronze, it'll be gone. People, they steal bronze and they sell it. So, you have to think about all these contingencies of how you're going to create something that is actually going to be permanent. So, any questions, Larry, about 2 and 3?
Well, later on in the agenda, we're going to talk about, does Saturday, May 8th work for people? I do think that we've been a commission now for about 1.5 years, but it always seems to me like we're just getting started. And so, to me, I think that's important to give everybody the grounding of talk about these big things so we don't either get ahead of ourselves or play in catch up. And so part of my discussion with Diane is, we're assuming, we're hoping we're going to get this check from this developer. He's obligated now when he pulls his first building permit to write that check, and I want to be ready for that. And that's really what the workshop is about, and that's really what creating the, really task 3 is, how do you do that first project? So I was trying to point out to Liz possibly is that task 3 goes with every single art installation. You're going to have a general outline of a process of how you procure an artist and go. So every time you do a piece of art, you're going to do task 3, like we've talked about. So some of it's going to be, again, I think it's a good idea to do a smaller one first to kind of get everybody in the swing of it. But that task here, you got to do that for every public art installation, and this will. So that's really the idea. Was we're going to get this check. And I asked her to put a scope together of, okay, how do we go from getting the check to the ribbon cutting?
Kind of a template then of what we follow with every project.
Yeah, correct. But every time you do an art installation, you're probably going to do a call for artists. You're going to do the whole thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of the comments I want to make is, you mentioned Chandler and a problem that they had with sculpture. I think they called it the French fries. I remember that sculpture really well. It was abstract, kind of a wavy.
Yeah.
And I think if you have public engagement in every step of the way with this, that you are basically the advocates of public art to your community. And you want to get, whether it's online engagement or, public meetings are really, really important, so that a lot of people get to see what the concept is and you get feedback from the public. And if you get a lot of feedback, that really kind of forestalls having down the road the public saying, well, why did you put that there? I don't know where that came from. I had no idea this artist was selected to do that. So I think having public engagement, if you select the artist, have a stakeholder, always have arts commissioners on the artist selection panel, have arts professionals, have stakeholders, maybe somebody from a neighborhood association. If they're going to be in the neighborhood where that art's going, then it's great to have somebody from the neighborhood on the artist selection and follow that process all the way down the road. And then, when you've cut that ribbon, people are taking photos, the work is out there, you're always going to have people say, why are you spending money on art? That's a given. You're always going to have people say, this is not my taste, I don't really like it. But if you give them all the opportunity to weigh in on the concept and selecting the artist, then chances are you're going to have more success down the road.
Well, one of the things I saw at Chandler was that I got the impression that the people that decided to put the sculpture up did not really understand what the community really liked and wanted. Apache Junction is a different place. I know Liz does abstract work. I do abstract work. Abstract work does not go well in Apache Junction. People walk up, scratch their heads and go, what the heck is that? And if we put money into that without getting their input, we're going to lose at the very beginning. So we need to understand, part of the process is we need to understand what this community is all about and what the people are going to like. You know, we can't cater to the winter visitors that come in that are used to, from Chicago, that are used to seeing abstract art. We have to keep in mind what the people in this town want to see.
Well, and there's good abstract art and there's really bad abstract art too. I mean, I think there's.
This town doesn't appreciate good abstract art either.
Jeff and mine are both good.
She and I have both run into this trying to sell art in this town, and I don't care how good of an abstract art it is, it's not going to sell. What sells in Austin, Texas, or San Francisco is not even going to begin to fly here. So people want horses, cowboys, Indians, donkeys, dogs. Dogs are great. That's why I like the dog park, because the dogs are awesome. Everybody loves dogs. Who doesn't like dogs? Well, Joel might not like dogs, but everybody else likes dogs. But we got to keep in mind the flavor of the community, though.
Oh, I think that's why you got to have general public involvement from day one.
And I agree.
I mean, if you have, you know, a sculpture out there and it may be partially abstract, partially figurative, you know, you may get people say, wow, that's really great. But if you have a large number of people come to a public meeting and they resoundingly do not like it, then that artist goes back to the drawing board.
Well, we even saw that with the Kachina that was put downtown.
I've seen that many times.
And I love the Kachina. I think it was great, a great piece of work. But we had a lot of problems with that, with people coming up later and saying, who came up with that lousy idea? That thing's, it's not Apache, it's not superstition, it's not the Dutchman.
Well,
and I agree with you, we do have to have that public involvement. We got to get them in at the very beginning of it.
And is that outlined within the task 3, within the?
Yes, well, yeah, it talks about meetings, meetings with staff, Arts Commission, and general public as needed. So there's definitely, you know, it's listed under number 2, task number 3, down at the bottom where it says meetings. So
Great.
So we'll change the reference to the roundabout, just say a budget of 100,000, leave it generic, so we'll definitely change that. And then, for example, B talks about a artist selection panel. That probably is this group. So I don't know how it works in other places, but I would think rather than you go get 7 other folks, at least for the first project anyway, you would be the panel.
that's
We'll
what
probably
I was
change
going to
that.
say.
Yeah,
It's
we'll
like,
probably-
isn't that why we're here?
Yeah, we're the ones that get to shoot at first.
Yeah, this is still a draft. And then again, anything that happens here in terms of once that concept goes and you folks approve it, you would send that to the council, get the council endorsement. There will be a public hearing there, of course. And then they can come back and work on final submittal and so there's buy-in at that level at the council after you do, and then they can go out and do their final plans. So again, there's still some.
that's huge too, is having council involvement. Yeah. Because I've just seen cases where Arts Commission, public, and, you know, from the beginning they love the artwork, and then somewhere along the way it changes a little bit, and suddenly there are members of the public who don't love it. And the council members that I've seen in another city who initially said that this is a great artwork, suddenly they've totally flipped. So I think getting council buy-in is also very important.
Yeah. So the next 3 tasks I think are in your work plan somewhere eventually. So I think we kind of wanted to prioritize 1, 2, and 3, and then 4, 5, and 6 would come, you know, once we get our feet underneath this.
Yeah.
So
Sounds
again,
like they can be developed as we're working. Or
yeah, because we didn't, as I talked to Diane, we may have a developer who says, hey, I have a piece of art, because the code allows them to do a fee to a fund, or they can provide art. Well, we're going to have a plan in case someone gives us a piece of art, and we have to go through a process to make sure it's appropriate and is acceptable and all. That's what really 4 does. And then 5, again, we talked about is, again, inside the library, less maintenance. Outside, you got to kind of know those types of things, and reserving some money. So if you get a big donation, and now where does the money come from? I've been part of this 25 years later when the thing's rusting out, and the donor says, hey, you didn't maintain it, and you said you were going to maintain it, and the whole thing's ready to fall over. So maintenance is important.
Very.
And then, again, once we have 20 pieces of art or 3 pieces of art, we're going to need a way to keep track of all the data about that art. So that's what those is, but I thought those would come, I don't know, 6 months from now, or so. We're trying to phase in some of the work if we can.
Great. Well, I look forward to the next draft. And I guess I have one additional question in regards to scope, and I'll make it brief. I appreciate everyone's patience. I know we're over. In terms of communication and cooperation with ArtSpace 6, I'm guessing that is through these committee meetings or these commission meetings, or is there an opportunity to engage with Diane, like, for example, after our work group? Like, are we able to?
It's going to cost you $75 an hour every time
Exactly.
you call her. So
Exactly.
I'd rather have,
What I wanted
you
to
know,
clarify.
not 6 people calling her, but if folks want to engage, I think that should come kind of together. So there's not 6 different people doing that. So I'd be happy to, you know, forward stuff or however that.
Yeah.
But a part of this, I wanted to make sure that there were specific tasks and then specific identifiable deliverables that we're going to get at the end of it.
Great.
She may talk to you and not charge you, but I just assume
Well,
kind of have it
won't run that-
coordinated.
we
Kind of
won't
have
run
it
that
coordinated
risk.
as well.
Are we gonna have a certain number of freebies there?
Depends on who's calling, I guess.
Well, during the time that she's here, you're free to ask. Maybe we should just have an item on the agenda that just says open questions for the.
All right. Well, thank you for your review, Diane, and joining us again this month. With that, I'll move on to the next agenda item, which is a discussion and consideration of public art planning workshop for Saturday, May 8th, from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. in the Parks and Recreation Conference Center, located at 1001 North Idaho Road, Apache Junction.
So we need a motion to approve that because we have to publicly advertise it. So we were going to have you accept that because it'll be just like a meeting. It's will be open to the public, but I wanted a motion in a second to.
All right.
Everybody agree on that date if that's, or a different date if you have a different date you want to pick.
For expediency, I'll go ahead and call a motion, and
I move that the Public Art Commission hold a planning workshop on Saturday, May 8th, 2021 from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. in the Parks and Recreation Conference Center located at 1001 North Idaho Road.
do we have a second?
I second it.
Thank you, Gretchen. All right, and
I'll
roll call.
do a roll call here. Commissioner Klett,
Yes?
Commissioner Nicholas,
Yes.
Vice Chair Nicholas, Chair Buys,
Nay.
nay?
Nay.
You can't make it or what?
Can't make it. I'm busy that day, but I don't want to stop the committee from.
Well, let's see
engaging.
how the vote goes and maybe someone, we got a roll call going now. Commissioner Coe,
Yes.
Commissioner Danford,
Yes.
Commissioner Ham.
Yes.
Okay.
I can put my ego aside.
Well, is there another date that, is there another date that works, or is there another date that you're,
It would be in nearly June by that point, so I would hate to hold up the progress for my own benefit. I have utter faith in Vice Chair and other commission members.
Somebody take good notes for you.
well, I don't know if we have Zoom or Skype or call in or something. I think you can.
I'll be in
unless
the
you're-
bottom of the Grand Canyon, so I won't.
Oh, you won't have
I won't
a,
be
all right.
Kind of tough.
Okay.
Thank you, though. Excellent. All right, so I guess we have confirmation on the work session for May 8th, 2021, 8 to 12 p.m. at the Parks and Recreation Conference Center. Next item in the agenda, information and reports. I don't think we have anything here today. Staff report, nothing new. Call for future agenda items. Is there any call from the commission? I would like to add an item, Gretchen, if you're willing to hear more about the Superior Art Walk.
Oh, okay, sure, yeah.
All right,
And if I find out more information on the donkey, should I just forward that, or do we have to put that on the agenda as well?
yeah, you'd have to email it to have it on the
All right,
agenda.
I'll just email it, and then you guys can put it in. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And, all right, so selection of meeting dates, time for our next meeting.
We have, and this, I don't know if I had an answer back, but we have a congressman coming that evening, and we heard 6, now we heard 5. So we're not sure, so the idea was when we thought it was at 6, we would have it at 4:30, we would be out of here by 5:30. The other option is to have it on Tuesday, May 11th at 5:30, and then there is no conflict, but it's a different day. So I didn't hear back if the thing was it was supposed to be at 6, that's why we proposed 4:30. Now we heard it's 5, so I'm wondering as a backup, I don't know if it affects folks by having it on Tuesday at 5:30. We would generally have to be out of here by 6:30 because it could be a planning commission night, 6:45, so. Or 4:30 on the Tuesday, the 11th, then we have no conflict with a 7 o'clock meeting.
And I'll withhold my opinion as I'll be in the Grand Canyon.
And it is right on the heels of the all-day Saturday thing. So one possibility would be just to skip because it's 2 days after the 4-hour Saturday meeting, so we could skip May if you want. That's another option.
I kind of like that option.
Yeah, I think
But
that works.
I think that following Tuesday is not going to be good for me because I got another meeting to go to.
And that'll give Diane a chance to give a summer report. She can work on that. So, all right. So I don't know, Joel, this never happened to me before. What happens when they don't select a meeting? I guess, do we schedule it and then cancel it? Is that generally what happens?
Select it
No,
for
if they
June.
don't want to schedule it, then they don't have to vote on
No
it.
motion. Okay.
Correct.
All right.
Do we need a motion for the June meeting, though?
You would because the work session, you can't vote on anything. So yes, you would need a motion for the June meeting.
So can we have a motion for, does someone have a calendar, what the date is?
7th, June 7th at 5 p.m.
Do we have a motion for June 7th at 5 p.m.?
I'm sorry, 5:30.
5:30.
What?
5:30 p.m.
I like 5. That sounds good.
You want it at 5? 5, what time? 4:30? 2:30? What do you guys want to do?
5 works for me.
5 works for me.
5 o'clock work?
5, okay,
I'm
so let's,
for 5.
do we have a motion for 5 p.m. on June 7th for the next meeting of the Public Arts Commission of the City of Apache Junction?
I move that the Public Art Commission hold a meeting on June 7th, 2021 at 5 p.m. in the City Council chambers located at 300 East Superstition Boulevard.
Okay.
Do we have
I
a
second the motion.
Thank you, Gretchen.
Okay, Chair Buys.
Yes.
Commissioner Coe, I think she may have hung up. Commissioner Danford.
Yes.
Commissioner Ham.
Yes.
Commissioner Klett.
Yes.
Vice Chair Nicholas.
Yes.
Okay, we have a approval of that motion for June 7th at 5 p.m.
Great, thank you very much. And with that, I will adjourn this meeting. It is 7:14 on April 12th, 2021.